Analyze it now.
Christianity is connected to Europeanism and white supremacy, because like when people think of roots and you know your name is Toby, they equate that with Christianity. That's not Christianity. That's Europeanism. That's white supremacy. That's not Christianity. I ain't heard nothing about Jesus or nothing in that whole scene, but they equate that to Christianity. Why do you think white supremacy has been superimposed over Christianity somehow?
Yeah, that definitely is exactly what it's been. It's a, what's this word? They have a psychological term for it, where we create these correlations, right? But I think what happened is they used Christianity. European slaveholders used Christianity as a social identity. And they basically used God as their backing, right? So they created an entire field of mythology surrounding the appropriateness of enslaving African people, when it really wasn't, had nothing to do with the spiritual standpoint whatsoever. It was, of course, economically driven. So what do? They create this curse of Ham. They create this theory that God perpetuated this, that, and the third, and that Europeans are supposed to. The reality is the book that they were holding in their hands, claiming to represent, condemned their very actions. Raping of women, selling people as property, man stealing, like we talked about, the beating of people. The Bible says you can't beat your slaves. Old Testament, New Testament. Old Testament, if you beat a slave, the slave goes free. New Testament, if you speak to them roughly, you're not supposed to do that because God is your master, just like you claiming to be this other person's master. And the reality is you're both equal. So they basically brandished the Bible and claimed themselves to represent it falsely. And so this is how we come to get this association, is because they were running around claiming to be Christians while denying the spirit of God at the same time. And so I will say that as a Christian, we do have to give a certain level of credence. We have to give certain wiggle room in terms of what actually happened. Did they misuse Christianity to defend their actions? Absolutely, they did. And so it would be natural then for a lot of people to have an aversion to Christianity, because this person is claiming to be, it's no different from church hurt today. This person is claiming to be a Christian and look how they're treating me. So now I don't want nothing to do with that. And that's exactly what's happened in large scale. And I think, speaking to a spiritual audience, I think we understand why the enemy would create such a correlation to put that bad taste in our mouths so that we'd stay away from Jesus, because we associate it with the enslavement of our ancestors. I'm not going to say there's no better way to do it, but that's a really good way to do it, to have this pain that comes about, this emotional pain that comes about every time we think of, or every time certain people think of Christianity. It's associated with the embarrassment, the movies that we keep watching, the enslavement, the pain that our ancestors, the shame that they have felt and been handed down was associated with Europeans. But like you said, the reality is there is a clear distinction between Europeanism and Christianity. And the fact that they grabbed onto the Bible but didn't really follow it, it should be the number one thing, I think, that shows us this distinction. When we look at what they did and look at what the Bible says, you can't come to the conclusion that they were Christian. If you did not know these people and you were just assessing their behavior or their spirituality based on the book they claim to follow, you would never come to the conclusion that these people are Christians. But because they claim the name of Christ and wore, let's call it Christian tees, saying I'm a Christian, I'm a Jesus follower, then all of a sudden now we believe them, we take them at their word. But what did Jesus say? You shall know them by their fruits. And so it's a hard one. It's one that I have a lot of patience with people with regards to, because it's not just something, they don't want to believe. No, it's deeper than that. It's deeper than just not wanting to believe. These were some real wounds that were inflicted in the name of Christ, and we have to understand that that's why the people are associating these two things. And it's our job, and I take it personally as my job to help chisel away at that, because there is a clear distinction. And when we see Christ for who he really is, then we'll understand that he had nothing. And I'm sorry, if you have to cut this, you could cut it. But there are people who have internalized this misunderstanding. African people of African descent, who say they are grateful for slavery. If it wasn't for slavery, we would never know Jesus. That's not true. That's not true. And what that is, people call it Stockholm syndrome. It's accepting a mythology that they created. That is not true. As we started off this conversation, Christianity was present in Africa long before slavery. And so what happens is, because of the trade routes going all over the continent, people are exchanging thoughts and ideas. We did not need colonialism. We did not need slavery to be introduced to Christianity. And it was never God's expressed. We won't find God's expressing a will for Africans to be enslaved. The whole curse of Ham thing, Ham wasn't even cursed. It was his son.
It was the son.
It was one family, and we see the fulfillment of that curse carried out in scripture. So to think that it perpetuated through all these thousands of years later, that's not the God of the Bible. It's not true. Exactly. So yeah, sorry.
No, hey sis, you rocking it out like I knew you would. So, and I tell people all the time, they talk about the curse of Ham, and I'm like, listen, we talk about, how insidious racism can be. We talk about how manipulative these racist minds can be. So why is it difficult for you to understand and to see that a co-opting of a powerful movement? Because let's be clear, they wouldn't have wanted to co-opt it if it wasn't powerful. So they co-opted this movement, this spiritual tradition that they saw sweeping everywhere it landed, and they co-opted it and they used it to justify the evil things they wanted to do to the indigenous people of every population they touched down on. We see that in history. So it's not rocket scientists. It's not rocket science to see how they did this. And the fact that it went into Africa and Africans actually contributed to how we see and interpret the scriptures and the doctrines of Christianity. And nobody ever talks about this. As a matter of fact, some of these people who we know are clearly African, we see them in books as Europeans. And so nobody this is what happens. And so it's not difficult to see how they co-opted this thing and used it how they saw fit. But we also see the counter to that, because you saw people always fighting against that. And I find it, as you go more in depth and you start looking at it from both sides, it's like, why is it that we can only see one side of the picture, but we can't see the other side? Like, I always find it difficult to understand. You want to call these enslavers Christians, but you have no knowledge, no understanding of the other Europeans who were fighting against that. Mm-hmm. The people who were in the Underground Railroad and hiding our ancestors under floorboards at the risk of their own life. Mm-hmm. You don't talk about those individuals. So I'm just like, there's no balance. And I understand being hurt and being upset and having pain associated with certain things. And I know how something can kind of get in your head and fester. But at the same time, if you really want to honor your ancestors, if you really have respect for them and what they stood for, you gotta present their story in truth. And they took this thing and made it their own. The invisible institution was the beginning of the Black church. You look at Richard Allen, Absalom Jones, how they broke away from the Methodist church and formed the AME church and started working with the Underground Railroad to free our people. And they set up systems of everybody contribute $1. When somebody is a widow or some children need help. We all kick in. They started those things, and then European churches started picking that up, but they started that first. So we were innovating things like that and it's biblically based, but we were implementing it in real time, and nobody seems to want to acknowledge that. But you just want to look at this false narrative of it was forced on us, it was beaten into us, and it's like, really, you can't beat something like Christianity into somebody. Like trying to beat me and tell me to believe something. I might say I believe it to get you to stop, but I'm like Smokey on Friday. But when he leaves, you know what I mean? It's like I don't really believe me. And if you beating me and you saying you're a Christian, why would I want to be that? Like we really take our ancestors to be imbeciles. Like our ancestors were so stupid that they gonna look at this thing where people beating them to death and say, yeah, I want to be what they is. Exactly. No, that's not how faith works. No, they believed it because they had experiences that was indicative of why they should believe it. And they got results from that belief. They wouldn't risk in their life at night hiding and meeting up to have church because somebody forced them to. That, like, what are you talking about? I had one person tell me, I'm talking about the invisible institution. He was like, yeah, but they still had overseers. Why did they call it the invisible institution then? No, it wasn't no overseers. They had
the overseers.
Yeah, I'm like, what? You just made that up. They had to sneak and do this.
You know what's interesting too is that the boom that took place in Christianity in terms of African descendants after slavery was over, that was the biggest. It was the biggest blossoming afterwards. So if they had been faking the funk to get out of there, why did we continue? The next generation, I'm telling my kids what's really up. Like, okay, listen, guys, we were just doing that. But no, we see it continue to grow.
Yeah. And we like I say, we see it as the backbone of, like, when we see these black towns, affluent black towns, independent, popping up all over the place. It's the black church is the backbone. I seen this picture recently on YouTube. It's a short, and you see these men, black men and women coming out of this church, and they dress to the nines, distinguished. And it's like the 1920s or 30s, and it's like, wait a minute, when we going through a depression? They don't look like they suffering, and they coming out of a church, and it's like, wow. People don't talk about that though, and you have to understand, like. People forget when you move a certain way and you have a spiritual basis behind it, things work out a certain way for you. And you can see it in this image. They coming out, they smiling, they dressed to the nines, everybody happy. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought we was going through a depression then. But at this particular juncture, they didn't seem like they were suffering too bad. And I think we forget about how within like 80 years of coming out of slavery, our people had it going on. And the black church was a huge part of that.
Man, the black church is helping people to understand contracts, helping people to make labor contracts so that they wouldn't fall into this indebted servitude thing where you basically slavery under another name, right? They're teaching people how to read, making sure there's literacy programs, making sure that the voting rights are established. And you said 80 years, and there was a lot accomplished in 80 years. But the Klan, let's talk about the Klan for a brief second, right? The Klan started in response to, let's call it Black excellence. It's the best way I can articulate it. Immediately following emancipation, we had our first senators. I'm talking about immediately. The businesses were thriving immediately after emancipation. And so what they were doing was trying to terrorize us out of the state of climbing that we were in. Because like you said, we had submitted to Christ. We were about our business. We knew the practical and spiritual application of the scriptures. That God wanted us to have certain principles in our regular daily lives that would help us to reach a certain status. Whereas the Europeans were telling us, well, if y'all get free, y'all not gonna know what to do with yourselves. Y'all gonna need us. Nah, no. So what they do, they come up with the Klan. And if you look at the year that the Klan started, it was in response to us climbing, and we didn't take much long, right? Very much long to do so. And so again, just digging into history for ourselves is very liberating. It's very freeing when it comes to some of these doubts that can tend to try to creep in with regards to being Black, and am I being disloyal to my race by accepting Christ? These things are easily answered. It just takes a little bit of legwork, and not very long at all. Like, it won't take long to understand the truths behind these things. And the name of that book, the second one that I was talking about, was The Religious Instruction of the Negroes. And they made another book off of that called How to Make a Negro a Christian. And that book is not a historical book. How to Make a Negro a Christian it takes parts of the religious instruction of the Negroes, and it adds a lot of commentary, but it doesn't show the entire book, right? So go to the book they claim they got it from, and you'll see that he was begging, please let these people learn about Jesus, and we can do it in a way that won't make them, rebel. That was the book, and it was in the 1800s. So,
yeah, and man, and people talk about that second book as if it's a historical, like, it's so crazy. Like, some of the things that we kind of get wrapped up in that we think are factual, and it be garbage. So we had about 40 minutes. I definitely appreciate you taking time away from your family and giving us this knowledge. And one last question, and it's pertaining to, like, the civil rights movement, which we know could not have occurred without the Black church. And we look at, like, blatant disrespect for figures like Fannie Lou Hamer, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and even Medgar Evers and other people who we know were Christians. Malcolm X get his love because he wasn't a Christian, even though they don't like Islam either, but they give Malcolm a little love. But what's your take on how nonsensical it is for people to disparage the Black church, figures like MLK, and on YouTube and stages like Facebook and other places? Because I saw a post, and I saw red. It had Dr. Sebi, Malcolm X, and MLK. And the heading said, "I'll take Malcolm and Dr. Sebi. Y'all can have MLK." And I was like, and don't get me wrong, I know my man was flawed, as most of us are. And so I'm like, so Dr. Sebi put his life on the line for real? Like, shout out to the brother, but you would take Dr. Sebi over MLK? Shout out to Malcolm. I love Malcolm. Malcolm X and Dr. King are two of my favorite people in history. Like, I'm just fascinated by it. Both of them died at 39 years old. I'm 46. And I look at what they accomplished by 39, and I feel like a failure sometimes. But I'm just, like, amazed at the life they had, and they didn't even reach 40. But
can I keep it real with you?
Malcolm, yeah, I was just I'm gonna say this, and this is not just trying to be disrespectful to Malcolm, but he had the luxury of being up north and speaking on what was going on in the South with the nation. Like that, they was safe up there. He was talking about what was happening in the South. Dr. King was in the trenches, getting things done to him, getting hit upside the head, experiencing that hate. And I'm like, that's the one you throw away? But go ahead. You said, can you keep it real? Keep it real.
So the people that make these arguments, respectfully, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, outside of making these arguments on the internet, what are you doing to contribute while you're benefiting from the literal blood of this man, these men? Yes? He died. It's not a theoretical he could have. He was killed. We all know he was killed and by whom he was killed. We all know this. And we're benefiting from the work that he put in to end segregation, to make sure that we had the ability to enjoy civil liberties that had been on the books since 100 years before, right? So what I'm trying to understand is all of the beef that you have because he was nonviolent. I'm not endorsing violence in any way, but why don't I see you with your chopper? What is going on? Why are you instead of knocking down what he's doing? Why aren't you showing us the better way to get it done? And everybody who makes this argument makes it from the comfort and safety of their cell phone or laptop without actually being out here doing what he did. So that's my beef with it.
Man. Congregate brothers and sisters, if you didn't know why I wanted to have this queen on to give y'all this information, now you know. And the sister is a lawyer, as you see, Esquire by her name. She's one of the best researchers, best historians you're gonna find. She has a wealth of knowledge, as you can see, and she knows how to disseminate information. I just want to make sure we give her flowers. Let me make sure I hit this. Let me turn this volume up right quick. This definitely let me give her respect. I definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us. And I think the family gonna be edified. You hit me in my chest a couple of times. So let the Bethel family know where they can follow you on YouTube, Facebook, etc.
First of all, thank you again. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your kind words of encouragement. All praise to God. He put this passion in me that I try to put down and I can't. It's all him. And you can find me anywhere. I'm mainly on YouTube and Facebook. I do have an Instagram, but I don't hardly be on there. Just by my name, by Nefernitty. I come up easy, I think. But yeah, I really appreciate this. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to hit me up and we can talk about it, or I'll point you to some resources, because like I said, people need to know. It's not a luxury that we have to where we can just ignore these truths. The mythology has been circulating for so long and so strong that it's time that we be able to stand up and point with facts. And we got the facts. The facts are there. The ancestors' own words are there. The historical documents are there for us to point to and say, this is what reality is, as opposed to here's the myth that I've been hearing all these years, you know? So I pray that it leads somebody to want to study for themselves and be grounded and be a resource in your community, your family, to be able to point people to the truth, so that uneasiness can go away, because we follow the truth. His name is the truth. So all roads that lead to truth are going to lead back to Christ.
And there it is, family. So again, this has been another installment of the 2023 Black History Bethel presentation. This is our sister Nefernitty, and y'all keep her in your thoughts and prayers. This sister is amazing, and we do hope to have her back to contribute again. And I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Sister, we appreciate you. And we are going to get out of here, family. We will be black at it. That is peace.